G'day, welcome to another edition of the Safety at Work blog update. I think this is episode 4. It's early April here in Australia, so we're getting ready for winter and hopefully some rain. But we're not here to talk about the weather. Over the last week or so, the Safety at Work blog has been pretty busy on and pumping out some articles to subscribers and to followers on some issues that we've dealt with in the past, but are not going to go away, and in fact are progressing rather well, at least in a productive way. There's a new Senate inquiry been announced by the Australian government into workplace deaths. Now, all inquiries into workplace issues are welcome because it's going to add to our sum of knowledge about what happens, what the causes are, and all of those sorts of things. It's a shame in a way that it focuses on deaths, because we know that there are as many serious illnesses and serious injuries, many more than there are of deaths. And they're easier to study because the person who's injured can give you some immediate feedback on those issues. So I think the Senate inquiry, don't know what was the catalyst for it. The Senate inquiry, though, will be useful. But probably could have been more useful. But anyway, look, it's only been announced. Terms of reference are out. We'll see how that goes. Automation in the workplace is continuing to be an issue. There's various surveys and reports coming out all the time about this many percentages of people will be out of work by the robot, apocalypse or whatever else. We've written this week about some stats that I think are of particular concern to the middle-aged or to the elderly men in particular, in that the robots may be on the front line of robots replacing, or automation replacing, their jobs, but they're also in a difficult position, a difficult social or life stage position to change their careers or change their occupations. Rather than looking at something that's just a generic change across the entire community, I think it's probably worth tailoring into specific age sectors or and genders. I think it's not going to, the impact's not going to be equal to everyone, and I think we need to start looking at where it's going to be most disruptive. Some of the readers of the blog will notice that the review of Jeffrey Pfeffer's book, Dying for a Paycheck, is up. That book's now out, and look, I think it's obligatory reading, but we've mentioned that before, so I won't go on about that. There was also an app that was released. I'm fairly critical of apps, but this one was not designed as a workplace safety app. It was about a template, a prompt, a process of people recording their impressions and the information about incidents, not necessarily workplace incidents. So I think the prompts, the memory prompts, is a really good way of formulating our thoughts and getting first-hand information, hopefully first-hand information, as quick as possible. I think it has great potential for helping workplace investigations. I hope that works. Sexual harassment and its impact on workplace mental health and occupational health generally is still in the press. It'll be in the media for a long time to come. A new code has come out from the film industry. It's just a code at the moment, or a code of conduct at the moment. There's going to be a lot more documentation behind that. It requires a lot more analysis, and I'm hoping that comes. It will come, but I just hope the indications are at the moment that occupational health and safety elements, the history, the opportunities for controlling those hazards are not really being addressed. Also, I'll call Melody our correspondent in Asia. Melody Kemp has written about some of the challenges of asbestos in the country of Laos. Look, it is indicative of how we treat our fellow workers and our fellow citizens of the world. Melody's extremely knowledgeable in that area and in that region. and she's a published author on occupational health for women in the majority world. Always worth reading Melody's articles. So that was the most recent article on Safety at Work blog. As I do with these updates, I'm going to mention a couple of books that have come out recently. One that is an expensive book, but a fascinating book, and I'm really hoping to write about this soon. Professor Michael Quinlan has written a book called The Origins of Worker Mobilisation, and this mobilisation is well over a century ago. So I thought, well, how does this relate? It's a very academic book, but there is a considerable amount of information about safety. Fascinating. I've never seen anything written about safety in that period prior to the 1900s, other than in relation to the Industrial Revolution. So it'll be an interesting one to look at. There's also a book I mentioned at the Newcastle conference I spoke at the other week called The Business of Sleep. I think I've mentioned it before. The more I read it, the more fascinating it becomes, and the more important sleep is seen as a necessary business and productivity tool. Also, probably the last book I'll mention is a new one about factories. I think it's called Behemoth. It's written by a guy called Joshua Freeman, and it's a history of the factory and the making of the modern world. It's an interesting counterpoint to some of Quinlan's works. Doesn't have a great deal to do with safety, but safety is contained within the working environment. So it was interesting to have a look at how factories have evolved and what was the intention of the design of the factories and whether they had any safety impacts. It reminded me a little bit in terms of topic from a book that was written by Gideon Haigh a few years ago that looked at the development of the office, which was probably more contemporary than factories, given that manufacturing is declining in the Western world. But Behemoth sounds a really interesting book. So, Safety at Work blog is continuing to publish free and subscriber-only articles. It's been going for 10 years. I'm hoping that it'll go for another 10. It's lots of fun to do, and I think it's an important independent voice in occupational health and safety in Australia in particular. But I'm surprised at the amount of readership that we get from overseas as well. So that's what we've been writing about in the past week or so. There's a couple of books that I'm reading and that will get reviewed when I'm finished with them and when I've got the time. So that is the Safety at Work blog update number 4 for now, and thanks for watching, and please visit the Safety at Work blog site. That's www.safetyatworkblog.com, and please feel free to subscribe. It'd be great to have your support. Thanks.